If I can get your thoughts on the indictment of Donald Trump in the documents case. You had warned it was a national security threat back when the original search took place at Mar-a-Lago. Give me your assessment.
Well, I think that, we've seen now with the audio tape that is out today as well, that there's just simply no question that he's unfit to be the president of the United States. And, accountability really matters. Accountability for those issues that we've now seen in terms of this indictment over the documents. Accountability for what he did on January 6th really matters. And I say that, I think the Department of Justice has done a good job in terms of the prosecution and the convictions that they've obtained for hundreds now of the people who actually were in the Capitol, for the more senior people, for seditious conspiracy, for some of the Proud Boys and Oath Keepers. I think it's fundamentally important that not just the foot soldiers are held to account for what happened, but that accountability go all the way up to the top. And if it doesn't, then those things will happen again, and we'll begin to see the republic unravel. I want to drill down on that a bit later in our conversation. But let me ask you this: after the indictment, you reminded Republicans of something you had said before, and it was you are defending the indefensible. There will come a day when Donald Trump is gone, but your dishonor will remain. I'm wondering if that doesn't ring a bit hollow now, because he has shown incredible strength through all this. 2 indictments, continues to lead the field by a wide margin for the Republican nomination, and appears to be getting stronger. What are your thoughts? Well, I think that it proves my point. I mean, the dishonor of continuing to defend a man who has done what he did, who failed for 187 minutes to tell the mob to go home, the mob that he had provoked and that he knew was engaged in a violent assault on the Capitol, and then everything else that we have seen since. Obviously, the Select Committee made criminal referrals, and I think that it's very clear for the Republican Party, they have to choose. And the choice is whether or not you support the Constitution or you support Donald Trump. But those are mutually exclusive. And if the Republican Party continues down this path and moves towards, for example, nominating Donald Trump for the presidency, I think that we have seen day after day after day the party go further and further down this path of not being salvageable. And I think the single most important issue, and I mean that, the single most important issue that faces this nation, and we face a huge array of challenges and threats, and they're very complex, but the single most important issue is that Donald Trump never be anywhere near the Oval Office again. Your committee laid out a case against Donald Trump and his actions on January 6th. Do you expect the grand jury investigating for that part of the special counsel's office, do you suspect that they will bring an indictment? Well, I only know, obviously, what I see in the news, and I think it's very important, as I said. Given what we know he did, given the extent to which we know he attempted to overturn the election, given his direct involvement in the fake elector scheme, given the extent to which he aided and abetted, at a minimum, those who were involved in the insurrection, failing to indict, failing to make sure he's held accountable, carries with it real danger for the republic. And so I certainly think that it would be proper, and that's the reason why, obviously, we made criminal referrals. Do you think the DOJ and special counsel has moved swiftly enough, or do you feel like your committee kind of goaded them to move more quickly? Well, I think that it was really important for the Congress to investigate, and one of the issues that I found inexplicable among many over the course of the last couple of years was how many Republicans did not want to have an investigation of January 6th. And I'm very proud of the work that our committee did in a bipartisan fashion, and I think that it was what we did and what we learned and what we were able to do was to lay out in great detail the facts about what was a very sophisticated multi-part plan to try to overturn an election and to try to remain in office even though he had lost the election. He knew he'd lost the election. And then, of course, the tremendous dereliction of duty when he refused to stop the riot. And not only did he refuse to tell people to leave, but in the middle of what he knew was a violent assault, he sent a tweet at 2:24 targeting his own vice president. I mean, this is behavior that certainly someone who engages in that behavior needs to be held accountable and shouldn't be part of our political process going forward.
And yet there was reporting, I think as recently as last week, that the FBI and DOJ were being extremely careful not to appear political to the point of not moving quickly. How do you assess that?
I think it's very important for them to conduct their work in a fashion that is divorced from politics. I don't think politics should be part of their decision making, and I think it's important for them to proceed with care and to proceed methodically. But I also think, as I've said, it's crucially important that Donald Trump be held accountable for what he did to this country on January 6th and leading up to it.
You've been quite outspoken and continue to be quite outspoken, but why is your message being rejected, or appears to be being rejected by so many Republicans?
You know, we're in a moment now with the Republican Party we've never seen before in this country. And I think that there are multiple factors at play. One is that there's a cult of personality going on. Another is that leaders in the Republican Party who know that what I'm saying is true, who know how dangerous he is, are unwilling to say so. You know, there's a sense of, well, we're just kind of bystanders here. And so the lies have gone unanswered. And millions of really good and honorable Americans have been betrayed. They still believe what Donald Trump is saying. And those members of Congress, elected officials around the country who know the truth but who are refusing to say so are complicit in the damage that is being done to the republic.
Do you think he can be reelected?
I think that he must not be. Right now, if you look at the polls, he clearly is the front runner for the Republican nomination. I think that nominating him will result in the Republican Party splintering, as it should. And I think that everyone needs to be very aware of the danger that he presents. And I tell this to my Democratic friends, and I have more Democratic friends now than I used to. But it's really important for Democrats to take him seriously. You know, there can be a tendency I see sometimes for people on the Democratic side to say, well, look, sure, you know, the Republicans will nominate him, the Republicans are a mess, but we'll be able to beat him in a general. And that is playing with fire, and it's a risk we can't take. So I think it's really important for everyone to look at the threat that he poses apart from party ideology and realize it's something that we have to take very seriously and we've got to stand against.
At least on this issue, you seem so far apart from other Republican conservatives. And people ask, are you still a conservative? Is there still place in the party for people like yourself?
Well, I think those are two different questions. I am a conservative. What the Republican Party is doing today is not conservative. I think the most conservative of any conservative principle is fidelity to the Constitution. And when you have a party that has abandoned that, they've abandoned conservatism. So I am a conservative. I also think it's important for us to recognize, we've looked into the abyss as a country, and we've started to pull back, but pulling back completely and ensuring that we don't unravel is going to require thinking about our politics in a different way. And it's going to require that we think about making sure the people we elect are serious, making sure that people we elect are honorable, making sure that they're committed to substance and to policy. And there's nothing better than a substantive, engaged debate with somebody with whom you disagree. If both of you are engaged based on substance, then that's how you learn things, and it's also how you get the best policy for the country. And I think that we have to steer our politics back to those kinds of debates and discussions.
Right now, referencing the Republican run for the nomination, Chris Christie and Asa Hutchinson seem to be sharing a lane that takes them right at Donald Trump, criticizing his behavior and actions. How are they doing?
Well, look, I applaud what they're doing. Will Hurd has also gotten into the race recently. I think that anybody who is willing to speak the truth deserves support and ought to be praised from the outside. I'm only hesitating because I don't know that it helps Republicans for me to praise them. So, but I think what they're doing is very important.
Well, let me ask you this, is there a lane for someone like yourself, which is another way of asking, have you decided, are you going to run for president?
Well, I'm not announcing anything here today, Lester. But, the way that I'm thinking about where we are and what has to be done is much less about, what should I do in terms of am I going to be a candidate or not, and much more about stopping Donald Trump, whatever that takes, but also helping to elect other good candidates, down ballot. And if you think about the complexity of the issues that we're facing and the serious nature of the threats that we're facing, internationally, for example, and then you think about the caliber of many of the people that we've elected, which, there's a huge gap. And I really think as people go in to vote, I urge people to, first of all, run for office yourselves, put your name on the ballot. We need serious candidates so that when you go in to vote, you have choices. And then you really need to think about it. I think, we're at a moment where, Jamie Raskin, who served with me on the Select Committee, who's become a dear friend, says to me often that he looks forward to the days when he and I can disagree again, because it'll mean that we've righted the ship of our politics. And I think in the meantime, we need to make sure that everybody is active and engaged and involved. And I'm certainly going to be doing everything I can to support serious candidates. Also, we need to make sure that our college students are voting. I think that college students around the country are a hugely important voting group to help stop Donald Trump. And so I'm spending a lot of time on college campuses and hoping to get college students very actively engaged.
I'm going to take from your answer that you haven't decided whether you're going to run or not, or you're not prepared to announce it here. By the way, I traveled all this way because I heard you.
Sorry. No,
I'm kidding. But let me ask you this. If you were to run, would it be as a third-party candidate?
Well, I'm not going to do anything that helps Donald Trump. And I think that, I'll make a decision about sort of what I do and what comes next later on this year. But, I feel very strongly about how important it is that we not let slip away what is so special and magnificent about this nation.
Is that a warning to other potential third-party candidates that it might result in making Donald Trump stronger?
Look, not as a general matter, because I think that our politics are undergoing a huge, more than even generational shift, because the Republican Party has so abandoned any pretense right now of, standing for truth and for honor and for character. And when you're in a situation where one of the major parties has done that, then I think you do have to think about what other structures, including a third party, are necessary. And I think we have some time to let that play out and make a decision down the road.
You brought it up, and I think it's fascinating that your voice, you have to be careful who you endorse. So does that take away a lot of your potential influence? I mean, as you watch this campaign begin to pick up speed?
It's interesting because in the last cycle, I endorsed, for the first time ever, 2 Democrats, and actually campaigned in Michigan with Alyssa Slotkin, endorsed Abigail Spanberger in Virginia. And so I think that there are many of us who are serious, who want to do the work of helping to make sure the country goes in the right direction. And those candidates don't always break down along party lines. So, I mean, look, obviously my endorsement in a Republican primary is probably not like something people are really, begging for right this second. So that makes it powerful in another way. I can decide who I might want to endorse and get out of the race.
So you were busy writing a book now. I think the title is Oath and Honor. It's on the idea of preserving our constitutional republic. How do you remove the divides that threaten our democracy? What is it that we as voters should be thinking about doing or not doing?
Well, thank you for the book plug. It's available for pre-order, Oath and Honor. I think several things. One is thinking about American history and understanding, for example, what it means that for the entirety of our history as a nation, we have had a peaceful transition of power. And we have been able to ensure through Democrats and Republicans a peaceful transfer of power. And taking very seriously what it means to put people in positions of public trust. The people who are election deniers, the people who are attempting to unravel those fundamental values of this nation, they're very active and engaged. And so it means that we all have to be. And you can't sit back and think somebody else is going to fill that precinct position or somebody else is going to be on the school board. The institutions aren't going to defend themselves. And so the most important message that I can leave with people today is please get involved. And if you've ever thought about running, do it. Put your name on the ballot. Get involved and get engaged, as long as you are going to be faithful to the Constitution.
I think you had a little more blunt answer to that question at an appearance last night. Do I have it right? Don't elect idiots?
That's the shorthand, yeah.
That's the shorthand for that. I have to ask you about our institutions, but particularly here about the health of our criminal justice system. Hunter Biden, as you know, recently pleaded guilty or did a deal with the government regarding tax evasion. Many Republicans call it a sweetheart deal and evidence of a two-tier justice system. Do you think we have a two-tier justice system?
Look, I think that, the U.S. attorney who was responsible for the Hunter Biden investigation was appointed by Donald Trump. The Department of Justice, in the statement that they issued about the deal, said the investigation goes on. I think as a nation, it's very important that our justice system not be infected by politics. And one of the things that I have been really moved by has been the extent to which so many of our federal judges have recognized the danger of what happened on the 6th. And, working on the select committee, because we were engaged in litigation, there were a number of instances where we had debates about, what judges would do, and you fall into sort of the traditional partisan thinking about, well, this judge was appointed by a Democrat or this judge was appointed by a Republican, and trying to interpret how they would rule in some of these January 6th cases. And almost without exception, our judges recognize and understand, the damage and the danger to the rule of law. So I think that the attacks that we're seeing from the Republicans on Merrick Garland and on Christopher Wray, are unfounded, and they ought to understand and recognize the danger that they are fomenting by suggesting that this is somehow all political, that this is very serious business.
So the idea that the Biden administration has weaponized itself, the DOJ, is there merit to Mr. Trump's complaints that the DOJ has been weaponized?
No.
Okay. What does a second Trump presidency look like?
Well, there cannot be one. And one of the things that the investigation taught us, one of the things we learned was how many individuals were in important positions where they stopped him from doing things that were even worse. And none of those people will ever serve with him again. And so a second Trump presidency, will not have responsible people at the White House counsel's office, would not have responsible people at the Department of Justice. He said that, he would appoint Mike Flynn, who is, look, Mike Flynn, when I asked him in one of our select committee depositions, whether he believed in the peaceful transfer of power in the United States of America, he took the fifth. And so I think that among many of the other concerns one has to have, the idea of the people that would be appointed and the extent to which they would facilitate the damage that second Trump presidency would do.
Let me play off that question. The former president has been indicted twice, once in New York, and then, of course, the federal indictment. If there was a third, if there was a fourth, which is quite possible, where does that leave the country in terms of any efforts to unite the country?
He must be held accountable. And, I think if you look back to the arguments that Republicans were making after he was impeached, and when a majority of the Senate voted to convict, but it wasn't a sufficient number to convict him, there were many Republicans at that point who said exactly that, who said, look, we know he should be impeached, or we know he should be convicted, he should never play a role in our politics again, but this is just too divisive. We can't do this now. And that's the path that leads us to where we are today, which is, he's giving speeches saying, this is the final battle and I am your retribution. So he must be held accountable. And nobody should have any question or doubt that he'll, do whatever he has to do to get into the Oval Office again. And there's no way that you can unify this country separate and apart from an embrace of the rule of law and the Constitution.
It seems the threat to democracy discussion always brings us back to Donald Trump and election denialism at its core. But are there other threats that we need to look around and acknowledge, other threats to our democracy that go beyond Donald Trump?
Certainly. I think that what we're seeing now is a lesson that I hope we all will learn, that we can't take this for granted, and that, it's not just Donald Trump, it's any election denier. When you have, if you listen to what America's adversaries say about our democracy, a really good guide in terms of who not to vote for is any American candidate who's saying the same things our adversaries are saying. So when our adversaries are saying, democracy is obsolete, democracy is a system that can't function, democracy can't meet the needs of its people, the kinds of things the Chinese Communist Party says, that's what Donald Trump says too. And I think that, we have to recognize the democracy is all of us. And we have to take great care in how we preserve it. We have to take great care in how we deal with each other. And I say this as somebody who certainly, I have tweeted partisan tweets that I wish I could take back over the course of my career. I know that's hard for people to believe, but I have. But I think we all have to say, look, these issues matter too much. And if we don't treat them with care and treat each other with care and commit ourselves to defending our nation, then, all of those things that we've been so blessed to know will slip away.
As I said, our time is short and we have to conclude there. But Liz Cheney, thank you so much for making the trip and being here. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.